Hello, everybody. Today in the house, we have Dr. Stephen Crawford. He is the author of the book, Too Stupid to Fail. He's also a business owner. He's a mentor. He is a trainer. He's a father. He's a husband and more. Welcome to the house. Thank you for being here.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Paula. Gracias. Thank you.
You're welcome. So excited. So I would like to begin the interview honoring your grandmother. You
Mm.
wrote a letter to her on the book, and I would like for you to share with us how did she impact your life as a female, role model?
Yeah. Well, the things you don't notice when you're probably younger, you grow older and you start to reflect back and look. And I think that was kind of my revelation moment. And I think that the part that I'm writing about was I had looked at her entire life and everybody complains. Everybody just, I think it's within human nature to make people believe that we're not doing as well. So even when things are going good, we say, oh, they're okay. And we just have this kind of this attraction and this draw towards negativity. And I was doing a research paper in graduate school, and the research was the connection between emotional health, because some of my studies were in emotional health and psychology. And so I'm studying between the connection between emotional health and gratitude, and how people who are consistently grateful are happier. And I just said, as I'm doing this study, and they were saying how a lot of the antisocial medicines, the goal of medicine is not to socialize people, but to numb down their antisocial behaviors. And so here's an antisocial behavior. And so you think about that. Well, socialization should be the antidote for antisocial behavior. But rather than socializing people and take an intentional approach towards building community and emotional health, the solution has been to numb down their antisocial behaviors by medicating it. And so I'm making all these connections. And it's amazing that I go to my grandmother's house. I was on my way. I was raising funds to live in Costa Rica for a year, Pura Vida, and I was going down there and I was getting ready for this trip. And I'm standing there, and she had just got out of surgery, had an injury with her leg. And I sat there, and I just sat there for about an hour talking with her and realized she hasn't complained one time. And then upon deeper reflection, I realized I don't know if I've ever heard her complain. She has always been this person who releases from the essence of who she is joy, gratitude, and just a spirit of looking at the positive side of life. And I realized that she's probably one of the happiest people that I know. And so that was impactful for me. And so in comparison to my other grandmother, that was my father's mother on my mother's side, it was very difficult because her life was defined by complaining and disappointment. She grew up and was a model, and had all types of, she had a relationship with one of the most famous boxers in the world, Joe Louis. She dated him for a while. And she had all these things happening for her. But after 3 marriages and several kids in this family, and she became incredibly angry and bitter. And, there was a disconnect. And so I saw this parody, right? And my grandmother that I mentioned in the book, she passed away at 96. This grandmother died at 66. So it was just being able to see that it was a difficult comparison. But the truth is that, and the chapters on release, when we're giving, when we're releasing, when we're allowing goodness into the world, there's something that shifts in not only the character that we become, but the own self-satisfaction that we experience in life. So that's kind of so the impact on me is really to frame life from that place of gratitude and giftedness and giving and loving. And that's really, for me, that was powerful.
That's awesome. I mean, it's like I love it how she played a big role, on your life. And sometimes we don't know it, that our ancestors, not very far along, just like our parents or grandparents, do play a huge role on how we make decisions in life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another decision in your life play a huge role with your grandfather. Could you please share with us and honor him as well?
Yeah. So, I grew up looking at him, he was okay. So there's no secret. Uh, I stand about 5'7" tall. My at my height, before my arc start to fall out of my foot, I was about 5'8". Well, all of my cousins and brothers, for the most part, are around the same height. My grandfather stood like 6 feet 2 inches tall. So he was, for us, especially growing up as children, he was a giant, and all my father and everybody, their uncles. And I guess it helps that my grandmother was 4'11". So,
Oh.
you start to put that together. So all my uncles are somewhere between, 5'6" and 5'10". I mean, that's kind of the height range. But my grandfather stands 6'2". So he was always already a giant physically in our family, where we looked up to him. But he also had a voice in which he used his voice as a pastor. He worked with Dr. King when he lived in Chicago, Dr. Martin Luther King, who they started trying to create banks that were owned by the community. So he started a credit union. He started a housing for mothers who were kicked out of in the 70s. It was really popular for women to be kicked out of their home if they got pregnant. So he bought all these apartments, and he would have women that would come and be able to have temporary housing for women that didn't have a place to stay rather than going to a homeless shelter. They would live at the community center at the church. He was very active and doing a lot of things. And mayors who were running for office would come in and ask him if they could speak to his congregation. So he was respected by so many people. And I guess as a 5 or 6-year-old, I looked up to him and said, that's what I want to do. I didn't know it was called influence at the time. I didn't know it was called leadership at the time. But I wanted to do that. And I wanted to be a part of that. And so becoming a speaker, and at that time, he kind of encouraged me quite a bit, because I told him at 5 years old, I said, I told him, I said, Granddad, I want to preach. And I can tell you, I probably heard him tell that story. The reason I know it so well, because I heard him, not because I remember it. I just remember him telling that story, oh my goodness, hundreds of times over the next, decade and a half of him just saying that this is, and so it would, and then I felt like I did get a little preferential treatment of his grandchildren, and people in the community really supported me. So that helped form and develop kind of my self-image of being an influencer, being a communicator, being someone that could speak out when I see things that aren't right, and really having that voice. So that was a strong piece. And so they worked in tandem. And although she was in the background, didn't like to speak out front, didn't like to be seen, through her quiet, gentle love and strength, incredible strength, even at 4'11", just having an incredible amount of strength, just really be able to have her own realm of power. And then my grandfather, who was very vocal, two different perceptions of power, but both of them very powerful.
That's awesome. That is awesome that he played a big role, and I bet you made him proud just by saying, "I just want to be like you when I grow up."
Yeah, I hope so. Right?
Yes, I mean you're following, his steps. That's amazing. Now, on your book, you talk about we all bottle 3 things. We all bottle our head, our hearts, and our hands. Could you please share with us, like, what is your message with that?
Yeah. So when we think about the head, I think it's the lenses that we look through. So, and I think it's important to really even take a step back and consider that most of us are not getting the results we want in life. We have to realize that, and most of us, many times, many people just make excuses and say, oh, this is what I really want. But we really aren't really being truthful and honest about it. Most of us know that we're capable of doing much more, and we're capable of playing at a higher level, playing a bigger game, and operating at a higher level than we are right now. We know that. We are not accessing or in use of all our potential. And so in many cases, it starts with the head, because it's the mental framing. We all have mental models through which we view the world. And so the 3 chapters I have on the head are to get us to really position. And the first couple chapters, reboot, reframe, is almost like hit the reset button and get ready to reframe the way you view the world. And then integrating this 3 different disciplines. One is called recognize, which means coming to right now awareness of what's really happening, what's really going on in your life. And embracing that and acknowledging that and being aware. Don't sleepwalk through life and allow other people to drag you. So there should be a daily practice around recognizing. I'm here. And some people do this through affirmations. They take affirmations and they read them every single day. And they don't just, it doesn't become rote or just memorize words. It literally becomes something where they snap themselves back to action and they say, this is going to be the mental framing for my day. So I'm going to recognize that. And then they're going to own it. Right. And they're in that space, they're dominating that space, and they speak from that place. That helps. That's a discipline that can help build that mental model. And then it's learning what to refuse. I think and I didn't want to have, and I really struggle with this because I didn't want to have a negative chapter in all of my RE words. But there is something about the competitive nature of human beings is I have to be against it. There's a lot of things I'm for, but I need to be against some things. And allowing negative attitudes, negative impressions, negative people to begin to help have access to my mental model, my mental framework is detrimental to my success, is detrimental to my future. And so I really had to do that. And then finally to resolve, that is to take that commitment. It's born out of refusal to buy it to other people's, but to resolve and to take a stand and to be ready for a fight. Mentally, I love what Paul Martinelli says. He says that life is a fight for territory, and every inch of your mind, you've got to be willing to fight for it. And it's that resolve that we take that is able to produce that. So that's the head. Then they have the heart, which obviously being able to be able to release was one of the areas, in that area of giving and pushing out, being able to recreate, which is kind of that new embracing of life and really being able to not get stuck in the same old places. And I use a story with one of my mentors that taught me that activity is not necessarily progress, and my rushing and trying to get things done. And I had to learn how to recreate. And recreation, which seems like a waste of time to somebody like me who is highly wired to take action, but I'm not reproducing. I'm not rebuilding myself in order to come to a place where I can take deep breaths and I can really think and use my imagination, my creativity. I'm cheating myself. I'm suppressing my giftedness when I'm running without margins. So running from end to end. So there has to be a process and a deliberate discipline of recreating myself. And I think I used two. I didn't use a third. And now it's slipping my brain which one I used and which one I didn't. But anyway, so but it's this place of whether we can forgive, we can open up, we can release, we can recreate. And the other one, I can't remember at the top of my head because so many 11 RE chapters. Yeah, I'm losing the other one. But it's about what we give out. It's about what we project. It's about being in a place where our heart is in a position to rejoice. There we go. So I think that was rejoices, and that's that place of gratitude, celebration, and really being able to do that. So forgiveness is a huge part of releasing, but also giving is a huge part of releasing. Recreating, taking time and space to recreate, but also position yourself to reimagine a world better, and always dreaming and being a person of vision. And then rejoicing is a constant chronic celebration, finding a way to celebrate all the time. That's what's going to bring the life, the joy, the wellspring of life into your life. So anyway, so that was it. And then obviously the hands, you got to do something with it. Constant process improvement, making yourself better every single day, and refining every opportunity that you have. And then also being able to re-engage and make the dedication that I'm going to take action every single day. I have a commitment. I'm going to take action every day. And finally, it's being able to stand and remain. And that's the ultimate part of the hands. Is not whether you can start. Everybody starts. Not everybody finishes well. And so that's the book in a nutshell, I guess.
And it's amazing. I mean, it is literally what we all need, is like to know that if like, in my very personal opinion, of course, like if your heart is aligned with your mind, you can do anything. You know, it's like you can do anything. And sometimes we get lost in our just busyness because we think we just have to do. But we have, like you said, we have get time to recreate. It's like stop, think, evaluate. Where are you at? Where are you going? What do we need? What do I need to heal? But I truly enjoy the book because it's like, it just gave me a new puzzle for my life. It's like, oh, you know, it's like align your heart with your mind and then go after your dreams.
Right. Well, I think, and some people are really good at one of the three. Some people are really good head people. They have the right framework. They've got the right mental model. But maybe their heart is all in pieces, and that's what tends to sabotage any success. And so their mind is aimed towards the right place. Some people has stinking thinking, but they've got courage and tenacity, and they've got heart. And some people have all the theory, they've got all the passion, but they just are afraid to act. And so, and it's like, so I think it is a framework where if we have those checkpoints within our head, make sure our heart is right, and then we really commit to a process of taking action. If we're able to align those things on a daily basis, I think it could be massive shifts that we start changing. And I think we'll start growing in ranks that we never thought we would penetrate before.
That's amazing.
And I have to say, I don't just think anymore. When I started the book, I thought it. I've lived it. I've lived it. And I think it, and anytime someone says, well, let's take all 9 of these ideas and let's just, tomorrow I'm going to put all 9 up. No, that's just ridiculous. No, start where you need to start. Find the one that is going to be the best for you to advance and move forward. And I definitely tell you, it was a learning journey for me throughout. And, I started writing this book 15 years ago.
Wow.
So many of the stories that I tell in the book, I was in real time. I was reading it the other day, and yes, I still read my own book, but I was reading it the other day, and I realized that I referred to a young lady who came one of my lead directors in the nonprofit I was running. I referred to her as my assistant, and I'm like, why would I insult her like that as an assistant? She was really a powerful leader. Well, I got to realize when I actually wrote that, she was my assistant.
She was your assistant.
And I know that, she bought the book, and I know she read the book, and I felt bad because I didn't go back and adjust. But from that space and time, that was our reality at that time. And that's why I knew I wrote that part of the book in 2006, because 2007, she was such a powerful, I promoted her to director. And so it's just like, so a lot of these things, I didn't know the end of the story. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was writing almost as a way to say, I'm stuck and I need to find my way out. And so writing started as my shovel to kind of dig my way out of a rut where I was stuck.
Wow. Okay. Now that you mentioned, like you were stuck, there is a part in the book where you talk about you are working for a nonprofit, and you are secondhand in there. Like you help develop, you help, bring productivity. The business took off. It was a nonprofit, and the main guy, the CEO, decides to leave, and they're all like guessing who's going to take that position. And by odds, everybody thinks it's you. You're going to be the next one that's going to take over the company, but it's not you. So help us understand how to go through that roller coaster of emotions whenever because you think you fell.
Yeah. Well, and to be truthful, I couldn't tell the whole story. I mean, or it would have been a novel, right? And so truth is, once that decision was made, that was when I decided I resigned, and I had a passion and a dream to learn the Spanish language, and I packed my bags, I raised money, and I flew to Costa Rica, and I lived there for a year. And so, and when I came back, I was promised a teaching position at a university. And that was one of the stories I actually had in there, but it got really too complex, so I pulled it out. But I got hired at a university, and I said, okay, this is where I will implement my training of young leaders, which was the whole job behind that nonprofit. I knew I was wired to train young leaders. That was and so I was going to use the classroom to do it. And I was fine with that. But my university had invested almost $2 million in a project of buildings that were donated by a guy that went to jail for embezzlement. And the government came to them and says, either you give us back those buildings, they're already $2 million in, or pay us the full retail value of what those properties would have been. The gentleman, the CEO of that company, had sold them these buildings for $1. And now they had to come up with the resources. Well, they cut my position. And then at that point, I had to find a job. And so I went to a car dealership, No one was hiring that in a nonprofit world, so I went to a car dealership. I wasn't getting any calls back, and that's how I ended up. And I realized that probably about 4 or 5 months in, that I'm sitting here, you know, in the second year of my doctoral program, sitting here with a master's degree. I have read more books out of college than because I've always been an avid learner. So I've read more books out of college than I've ever been assigned in college. So I have more understanding of leadership, how the world works, and all these things. And something just isn't working for me. How did I get here where I'm stuck? And I made the decision at that point, rather than retracting and falling to a world of self-pity, I was going to dig my way out. And that's actually when I started writing the book. It was a start of this process. It's no, I wanted to find out what this journey is going to go. And I started writing. And that next summer, as I mentioned before, they hired a political leader who basically was a neglectful leader. And when they did that, it created all types of gaps and holes within the organization that I had helped build. And it created an opportunity for me to come back in and help revitalize the organization. And so I was sure this time, once I revitalized it, got us back on the map, moving in the right direction, they were going to hire me to be the next leader. And he says, no, that's not going to work. And they passed over me again. And I had to take a secondary role in that for the second time. And I was just angry. But this time I didn't leave it because I had been writing by this time. So I was fully convinced I was the right person for the job. And so I was committed to do it. And so I began to fight. And so this is the thing. I think we have to learn how to, the lesson is we got to learn how to fight for our dreams. Even when, and that's what I said in the chapter on refuse, I refused to accept the results that I wasn't the right person. When you know something in your heart is for you, you don't negotiate with life. You don't say, I'm maybe, someday. No, this is going to happen somehow, some way. And ultimately, I believed in it so much, we really start thriving in that organization once I took over. We really began to expand. We expanded from one state to multiple states. We start doing training for leaders. We start working with over 300 organizations a year. We start doing leadership training all over the place. And then our main funder, we really only had one real big funder that was giving us to the tune of, millions of dollars at a time. That endowment came to an end. And they says, you got to figure your own way out. And because we only had one source, it began to slow down. And I took a pay cut. I just wanted to keep my staff. Then ultimately came down to staffs taking pay cuts. And ultimately the last summer that we were running that program, over half of the staff, almost all the staff was working for free.
Wow, they believe that much.
Yeah. And then I had trouble because the board really couldn't understand it, but you can't stop fighting for your dreams no matter what. And when I made a shift, the organization's name was Urban Leadership, and I shifted to Experience Leadership, which is my company now. I made that shift in about 2009, 2010. And when I made that shift, I haven't stopped doing the same thing. Now I'm still training leaders, activating people with dreams to go have an impact in the world. And we're just starting from the for-profit side, but we activate our leaders to always be thinking of how they're going to make an impact in the world. What's their dream? It's bigger than money. It always is. It's always bigger than money. Money is just pennies. It's nothing. It's worthless. Money is just a symbol of something else that we value. And so once you make enough money, what good are you going to do? And that's what we focus on for many of our leaders. So
that's amazing. Have you, on the book, you said that true freedom comes when a person has designed her life or his life. Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So people think they're free because they can make choices. And there's a distinction between freedom from and freedom to, right? You are free to get up in the morning and go for a jog. You're also free to just lay there and sleep it off. You're free. So you have freedom to something, but freedom from something is when you don't have to be controlled by something else. So if a person is, and people confuse the two types of freedoms. And so they think because they're free to do whatever they want to do, that they're free, but are they really free? Because they still have the constraints of the rules and the mental models that they're all trapped by. But when you're free from those mental models, when you're free from, that gives you a true freedom. And so I use the example of the prison or slavery or any type of system where, there was a gentleman who, I think 63 days, starved himself until he died. He was some type of boxer who lived, he didn't eat for 63 days. He refused to eat. He was a prisoner, yet he took control of his own life and refused to take in food. He went on a hunger strike until eventually he died of malnutrition. It's the longest on record person we've ever known to go without food for 63 days. Now he was drinking water, but he refused to eat food. And so that's an interesting dynamic. He's free, but yet he's in prison. But people who walk around with freedom every day are constrained in every other type of life, because they go to predictable jobs with predictable results, with predictable schedules. And are they really free? True freedom comes when we begin to write our own story. And people like safety. We like certainty. It's part of our psychological makeup. So when we're safe, we have a predictable reality. So we think we're free to do things, but we're not free from our schedules, our agendas, our financial limitations, our struggles. We're not free from those things. We're free to do things, but we would never violate that, because in creating our own path, we jeopardize our safety and certainty. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a leader, you're simply jumping out and hoping that the bridge forms under your feet. That means you're free. That's real freedom, because you're writing your own script. But the challenge is you've left off safety, security, and measured results. And so it's a scary thing to really be free. And so what most of us do, we create safety within our predictable ways. So it's a unique position. And I think that I want to challenge people not to just be free to do something. Anybody can, you're free to watch whatever you want on TV. You're free. Yeah, but that's a menial type freedom. A macro freedom is when you're free from the constraints that hinder you all around in your life.
That's beautiful, and it's true. And no, I wasn't aware of it until I began studying self-education. So, yeah. You mentioned on your book that unconscious habits determine our success. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, everybody can relate. If you drive a car, you can relate to unconscious habit. When you started learning to drive a car, you were very conscious. You looked at the end of the hood and you could see all the way to the end. You had this big steering wheel. You've got two paddles and only one foot to direct them both. I mean, it's all of these gadgets and buttons. And so you're looking around, digesting all this information. But you drive for a little bit, it's just a program that you run. And most of our lives are driven by programs. We have very little conscious attention that we can pay to anything new. The average, they estimate that about 2 to 2.5 hours a day is what we have for focus, engaged, conscious activity without needing significant rest and recovery. So our conscious thinking is only about 10% of our day, or less than that. So that means we default all of our other programming to habits. And so if 90% of your activity is based upon your other than conscious mind or your unconscious habits, and 10% of your day is based on conscious, would it be more empowering and more freeing to move towards success if you start changing your unconscious habits to do the things that drove you towards success? Because now you have the momentum of the 90%. But what most people do is, they read another book, they take more information, and they take in information, but it's worthless information until it becomes part of your unconscious. And that's why Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you'll call it fate. And so that's why we have to stop relying upon our conscious mind to drive our success. That will give you so far, but you really want to build momentum, you reprogram the unconscious parts of you and let them start driving you. And that's why the chapters of the book are built to dig deep, start flipping habits, and to take some intentionality to moving towards that.
That is gold to me. We can do that. Okay, so let's begin adopting, those habits that are going through, they're going to help us in our future. You mentioned on the book something about brain development, the alpha phase that our brain goes through it. Could you like explain to us a little bit more about it so like any parents that are listening to us can kind of be more aware of it, and if we can kind of help our children during that stage, then we have the tools.
Oh my gosh. Well, and this was one of the most difficult parts for me to realize, because when I was actually doing the research on this, it was as part of the research that went into my doctoral thesis, or my dissertation, and I was studying the mind and the different phases as through childhood, early childhood, and adolescent development. And I was just realizing that when you look at what's happening in the first 18 months, well, from 6 months in utero, so it starts even before birth, to about 18 months, the brain is learning at a hyper speed. It's learning how to interpret sounds. And so one of the things that got my attention, especially because, I'm from the inner city of Chicago, a very urban neighborhood with, we grew up with gunshots and fire trucks and police sirens, everything all night long. You had disturbances throughout the neighborhood. And so, and as I'm reading the research, I had a different view, a sociologically different view than many of the authors. I'm thinking about all the women that had babies that would, every time they hear a gunshot, every time they hear a siren or something that triggers them, their adrenaline kicks into high gear. It sends cortisol into their system. It compromises their immune system significantly. So now you're going to have a baby born with probably potentially health challenges. It activates the stress hormones that actually have the protective, more defensive mechanisms part of the brain be active, where it compromises kind of the learning and development of the frontal lobe. And I'm just like, wow. So people really struggle. I mean, so you take someone that grows up in a neighborhood where they're playing Mozart over the baby's tummy, over the mom's tummy, and then you grow up with one where she's dropping to the ground, hoping that bullets don't penetrate the house. The condition and the surrounding of that baby, one is going to be hyper aware towards danger, while the other is more cognitively focused and cognitively aware of what's happening in their surrounding. And in that super learning environment, after 18 months, they begin to understand spatial distance and everything else like that. For the first 6-7 months of the baby's life, when you leave out the room, they start crying because they don't know that you haven't left them forever or for good, because they don't understand the concept of not being in my presence and being somewhere else. A child can't even see within the first 6 months of life. They're starting to make images, but yet they're putting together ideas and thoughts about smiles and what's good, and finding pleasure and smiles in other people's faces. So all of this learning is happening, this super learning. And it goes to that second phase, which is that zeta phase, where they really, really begin to activate just kind of the hyper learning phase. And a child can learn anything, and they're not restricted. We don't have the energy. And I hate to say that, even though I was doing the research, I was trying to be intentional about how to activate my daughter's learning, but it is exhausting because they have an incredible amount of energy. And it's unrealistic to be always on, but to know the power of it is amazing. But once we hit the alpha phase, a filter emerges, because we got so much input coming in. The filter emerges, to call it the reticular activating system. It starts to filter information based on what's familiar, what's dangerous, what's friendly, and what's safe. And so the brain is starting to filter that. So it starts passing through all this unrelevant information, which unfortunately for us makes it more difficult for us to actually learn, because now we have our framing set, and now our unconscious bias is now dictating and directing the world that we live in. And so when we look for things, we look to confirm what we already believe versus exploring new beliefs. And so if I would have stuck with the script that I was given, I would have been stuck. But something happened to me somewhere between college and graduate school, where my brain started to rewire itself for learning and growth, although I had been stalled all throughout the younger years. So neuroplasticity is real, where your brain can begin to develop at any stage, at any level, where even you get 70 to 80-year-olds to start to learn and go to college to reactivate their brains. It's amazing how at any stage you can rewire your brain to grow and to learn more. But for most of us, we're left with a 6-year-old consciousness, unfortunately, because we don't know that we have the option of growth.
Yeah, that's
a long explanation. Sorry about that.
yeah. I know it's a blessing though. Neuroplasticity is a blessing. The discovery of it is like, and the research that is behind it is like, there is no excuses. Like go learn something,
Absolutely.
grow. On the book, you said that we must have a loving mindset. What do you mean by that?
Well, again, we have these two things, toward and away responses. A threat response makes us afraid and run the other way. A loving response makes us embrace and go towards something. Oxytocin is the trust hormone. Dopamine and everything. You got the happy hormones of norepinephrine and all these things, where you get energy and love and all those things. That's only going to be moved. And most people don't realize it. It's really the story that we're telling ourselves that determine whether we're moving toward it or away from something. And so why would you move toward growth and development if you didn't have a loving mindset towards yourself? We have permission to forgive everybody else and deal with everybody else. But many people, I don't say everybody, dare say everybody, but many people don't have a loving mindset toward themselves. They have a minimal mindset towards themselves. And so they're always trying to do more for other people than they're doing for themselves. And by that approach to life, it damages their ability to really, really press on and move forward. And so I think the power that we have as individuals is one that we can engage at a high level, and we can commit to loving ourselves. And when we do that, it can be transformative as far as what we can grow and how we can grow, and essentially make us limitless.
And there's a phrase that you mentioned on the book that it says, we make heroes out of people because it seems better than trying to hold ourselves to the same standard. And that's just what you're saying, which I was
Absolutely.
like, yeah. Like sometimes we do that, we
Elevate.
make that.
And let's elevate people so that we don't feel guilty about not reaching their level. So the person that like a Mother Teresa who gives her life to the service of the poor, Mother Teresa, wow, bless her, she's amazing. I couldn't do something like that. Well, we want to raise her up, because I mean, then we don't feel guilty about just being a normal person.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you're right. So we don't have to follow her steps, 100%. Before you go, I would like to say, thank you for all the wisdom and the information you're sharing with the world. That book, honestly, like from my heart, it came at the right time for me. And I know there's hundreds out there, millions out there that need the book. One of my favorite phrases that you wrote on the book is like, we are calling, like our highest calling is love. And we all have a purpose in this life. And that truly I almost cried just reading it, because it is true. It is true. We forget about it. Like, we go to church since we were little, and you know that you're meant to love one another. You're meant to love one another, and you hear that. And I don't know. Like personally, just I can only speak for myself. Is like, it's just now that I'm 37, and like I am feeling it. It's like I know the meaning. It's like I truly know the meaning. Is like, you have to love even when you're not being loved by others.
Yeah, the wall of self-protection does not creates a cult that it keeps us safe, but it diminishes our ability to love. And if we're not using that muscle, that choice to love, many of the strengths that we have in being able to love, which we're called to do, it begins to atrophy. It begins to be reduced. And so you see these, a funny story, and I didn't put it in the book, but I read it out of a book I was tempted to, but it said that there was this old cranky guy that just was mean and cantankerous. And a guy walks up to him and says, "Are you happy, Hank?" And Hank looks back at him and says, "Yeah." And the guy says, "Well, you might want to let your face know."
Yeah.
And so It's like his whole life, no one ever expected him to change. He was the cranky old guy. What a miserable existence. Why not be able to be able to release? And I think one of the parts is Hank could never hear his daughter's uh, love story because she met her husband in their last year of high school because they met at a dance, and he didn't approve of dances, and she had to sneak out to do it. So he was missing out on all the parts of his life because he had shut down love. He had shut down in order to defend. And we've got to choose whether we want to be right or we want to be loving, because people will offend you and you'll still be right. And yet you'll choose forgiveness, to not hold it to their account, so that you can be obligated to live out your highest place of love. And self-protection is very natural. And so we have to override our natural wiring in order to really begin to love people. It's not, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's important.
But it's possible.
It is possible. Yes.
It's possible. Thank you so much for being here. Anything you want to share before we go?
Well, I just want to invite people to really make a commitment, not just to yourself, but also to the people that are close to you, whether it be the organizations that you work with, that you're not going to stay stuck. And if you ever get stuck, if you ever find yourself in a rut, you're going to grab a shovel, and whether through writing, through gratitude, through singing, through making your life better, the last chapter is remaining. And when you really think about what's left after all is said and done, all of us are going to at some point leave this planet one way or the other. Why not live as in a way in which you're thinking, what do I want to be known for? What do I want to remain after I'm gone? What are the things that are going to really matter? And when we live from that perspective, considering the end in mind, it changes and influences the way we live our life on an everyday basis. And what we do daily is what matters. And so that's probably my parting shot of encouragement.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who is listening to us today. I hope you find a phrase, a word, an idea, anything that spoke to your heart, to your mind, to begin adopting it in your everyday life so that you can begin to create a brighter future. Blessings to you all. Thank you so much. High five.
Yes.